Hello everyone. I'm going to show you something. I'm taking my camera here with an old lens on it. I want you to look inside. Watch what happens when I do this. See these blades that are adjusting? What I'm doing on my camera is changing the aperture settings from a low f-stop to a high f-stop. And these aperture blades change with that, and they can drastically affect how your photos look. Why do they affect how the photos look? What difference does it make on your camera? That's what I'm getting into today. I'm going to show you two examples, and then we're going to break it down and we're going to talk about it. First and foremost, I want to reiterate a couple of things. I am by no means a professional photographer. I am not. My goal in these videos that I'm doing is I want to explain as much as I can with the knowledge that I have from the eyes and the perspective of a beginner. So I'm going to keep everything as simple as possible and straight to the point and explain things how I learned them and the differences it makes in my photography and how I compose any kind of shot. Now, I'm doing this video first on Aperture because a good friend of mine, I'm going to put his TikTok up here, and the comment he left says that I should go over Aperture first and the different settings of Aperture and how much it affects the actual photo itself. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, a second ago in my awful little intro that I just gave you guys, I said I'm going to show an example on the differences that the Aperture settings can make on a camera. So let's put those up. You can see the photo on the left and the photo on the right. They are the exact same photo. They have the same background. They have the same subject. They have the same focal length. The only difference that I made is the aperture. The one on the left is 1.8 and the one on the right is f/22. Now you can clearly see the difference in these photos. The one on the left, the subject is heavily isolated. You can't really make out any fine details on that left side. However, on the right side with the higher aperture as f/22, you can make out the subject and the background. It's not necessarily isolating the subject like the photo on the left. Now, the right side isn't perfectly in focus, but it is much easier to make it out. Aperture affects the depth of field in your photo. The depth of field is literally how deep do you want your photo to be. You can isolate the subject in your photo and just blur everything else in the background. There's no depth. Everything's just blur. It's just there. It's like stagnant, you know? There's nothing identifiable in the background. Not a lot of depth. Or you can increase that aperture number, that f-stop number, which we'll get into in a second. You can increase that and have a wide depth in all of your photos. You can see your subject, you can see what lies behind it, even further in the back. It may not always be perfectly in focus based on your subject, right? We're not gonna get into the whole focus thing right now. We're just talking about the aperture, but it's there and you can make out exactly what it is, and that influences the depth. Now, you saw in those pictures, I had 1.8 as the one on the left as my aperture, f/1.8. And then I had f/22. There's a lot of changes in between there, and I'll show you guys a diagram here in a second. But the f number stands for f-stop. The f stands for focal length, and the stop is a standardized stop in the range of your aperture. I'll show you guys a diagram, like I just said, that's going to really break it down a little bit more, and we'll put that up right now. So this diagram right here gives you an illustration, a more visual learning experience regarding the aperture blades. This one starts at f1 and all the way up to f/32. Each one of these stops, 1, 1.2, 1.4, all the way up to 11, 16, 22, and 32. These are standardized stops basically for whatever lens and camera system that you are using. They can differ just a little bit, but you can see how the aperture blades start very, very small, right? The hole is wide. That allows a lot of light to come in and actually hit your camera's sensor. If you shoot all the way up to 22 or 32, that is a very, very narrow hole, allowing a very, very narrow cone of light to actually hit your sensor. These holes in the aperture blades that allows the light to hit the sensor directly affects your depth of field. Now, how does each one affect your photo? Is it drastically? Does it affect it, in very, very small, margins? Or is there a fine line to how much it will drastically affect it to how much it won't drastically affect it? I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to show you now a series of photos, and I adjusted my aperture slightly, increased the f-stop number slightly every time over the course of, I think it was 6 or 7 photos. I don't remember. I'll put them on the video, and I'm going to explain there too the differences between them. And at one point, is there going to be a drastic change, or is it not a drastic change, or is it just gradual from the start to finish? So let's get into that. So these are the photos that we're going to be covering. I kind of missed one, so I started at 2.2 here and it ends on 22. But it will start at 1.8. As you can see, the background becomes, very, very blurred. It gets more clear as we progress through the photos. I know these are small, so we're going to get into the larger ones now. This one starts at 1.8, followed by 2.2. And as we progress through these photos, the background becomes slightly more clear and more clear and more clear with every single photo, ending in f22, which has the most visible photo, but the subject remains the same. All right, so now you see exactly the changes it makes with every single photo based on the ones I've just shown you. The same photos, the same settings, other than the aperture is the only thing I changed. I put my camera on aperture priority and let the camera do the rest of the work to maintain some kind of photo integrity, right? I didn't want to mess with the ISO with the shutter speed. That's a completely different video. That's a conversation for another time. Now, in the simplest form, right? Again, what is aperture? The easiest way I could explain it is you have your subject. How much of the photo, other than your subject, do you want to be visible, notable, or in focus, right? The lowest f-stop that I have on my camera is a 1.8. That's going to isolate my subject. The only thing in focus is that subject. Everything else in the background is extremely blurred. As I increase that, more of the photo becomes visible. So in a blanket statement, the easiest way that I can explain it without any nuances or overcomplicating everything is the higher your f-stop, the more is going to be in focus in your photo. The lower the f-stop, the more you isolate your subject. So for instance, if I'm taking a portrait of a man or a woman, I'm going to want a relatively low f-stop so I can isolate them. If I want the background in focus more, because it's like a cinematic where it's like a scene I'm setting, right? I'm going to increase that f-stop to have more of that in focus. If I'm shooting a landscape of some mountain range or a hill or something, I'm going to naturally increase my f-stop to have as much in that photo as I could possibly encompass, to be as clean as I can possibly encompass it, right? That's the easiest way I can explain it. There's a lot of other settings on a camera, and eventually I'm sure I'll get into all of those. But the easiest way I can explain it, lower the f-stop, the more you're going to isolate your subject. The higher the f-stop, the more that is going to be visible. I almost forgot to mention, if you have an iPhone, and I say that specifically because the way they kind of display the interface, like on the camera, it's a little different than Android phones. But you can also do this on your Android. They just have it as like a strength thing. But let me explain. So if you have an iPhone and you go into your camera, okay, and you go to the portrait setting, like the portrait mode on your camera, you can click the settings on that, and there's a little pop-up that shows a little F. It's kind of like italicized, If you click that, it's going to allow you to adjust the aperture manually on your screen. Prop your phone up, slide it a little bit, and slowly adjust the aperture. I'll take a video of this and I'll put it in this video as well, right? It's kind of like an overlay to show you guys. It's kind of like a real world example that you can do. All right, well, now you have a real life example, like a visual learning experience that you can use on your phone. And I've kind of explained a little bit about aperture, not a whole lot. Again, I'm keeping it to the basics. I don't want to overcomplicate anything. There's a lot that I could have went into, like the f1.8, how do you even get that? It's your focal length divided by the diameter of the aperture blades. That's not important for average photographers. That's not relevant at all. So I'm not going to overcomplicate things. I'm going to leave that stuff out because it's not significant. I just want to keep things simple and to the basics, and what I found works. If I have a subject and I want to isolate that subject, I'm going to have a pretty low aperture. Okay, my f number is going to be pretty low. If I want a lot of it in focus, I'm going to increase that. And that's it. Again, let me know if there's something you want me to cover. If there's something in the comments that you think that is incorrect, or something that I need to fix in the video, please. Criticism is welcome. I'm trying to keep this very, very basic, very, very simple, and I'm open to everything. And if you guys have an idea for the next video, or if you want me to go more in depth, or if you want to talk about the shutter speed and stuff, I can do all that too. But just let me know in the comments. I'm very conversational. I'm going to be active, And, you know, catch me on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll put all that through here. And have a good day.